Oh, fantastic. Hello, my name is Beatrice Zatorska. I am the founder of PD Buddy app. And today I will be speaking on the behalf of young onset Parkinson networks. And I'll be speaking to Marcus Yountz, VP of Clinical Development and Neurology at BlueRocks Therapeutics. Good morning, Marcus.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me to talk to you today.
Marcus, I've been prompted to speak to you because of the recent announcement of FDA approval of the phase 1, the clinical trial for your therapies for cell therapy for people with Parkinson's. As you can imagine, the whole community of people with Parkinson's, caregivers, families like myself, I'm a caregiver for my husband, are very excited. After 40 years reading papers on cell therapies, we feel that, oh, this might happen actually in our lifetime. So that's the excitement. I know there's still a long way, but we would like to learn a little bit more what is happening. So before I dive in asking you questions about the trial, the phase 1, just very simple question. If you can simply explain to us what is cell therapy and how does it gonna to help people with Parkinson's?
Yes. So cell therapy, as we are looking at it, is another way to put this will be cell replacement therapy. So as you know, and I expect many of your readers will know, in Parkinson's disease, one of the main things that happens is that the cells in the brain that produce a chemical called dopamine die off over time. You lose those cells. And what we've developed is a stem cell-based therapy that effectively tries to replace those lost neurons. So we start with stem cells. We effectively coax those stem cells into becoming neurons that can produce dopamine. And then we implant those back into the brain, essentially trying to replace what's been lost. And the hope there is that the implanted cells will reconnect in the way that the original cells did with the circuitry in the brain, and hopefully restore some of the lost function in people who have Parkinson's disease.
Fantastic. So phase 1, it has been approved as a safe cell therapy. Could you tell us a little bit more? You know, how many patients took part in it? What are the results of it? How do they feel? I think a few weeks ago, we heard from the Lund University in Sweden. There was the first patient. He was sharing his experience from also going through some hallucinations and the procedure, but he loves it. He feels great. I mean, tell us more how it went on your side.
Sure, of course. So yes, our study is just finishing the phase 1 study. We've been able to look at data throughout the study. So as you've pointed out, we've been able to release some data over time. But as you said, our study is a phase 1 study, which means it's really geared towards looking at safety. And that's the primary endpoint in the study. And additionally, we looked at feasibility. So are we able to do what we'd like to do? Can we put the cells in where they need to go every time in every patient? So we were able to look at that. And then additionally, we have more exploratory endpoints where we look at some of the clinical outcomes. So how are people feeling? How are they doing? So in our study, we had 12 patients total, and it's important to point out, and I think your readers will be interested to know, it's a 12-patient study, but open label. So in other words, there's no placebo group in this trial. And again, that's very common in early stage studies where you're predominantly looking at safety. So we had 12 patients. We followed them all for 2 years. And then the patients are able to move into a longer term follow-up study where we follow them for a longer period of time, because we'd really like to see how people do long term as well as just over the first 2 years. So that's the study that we are talking about. and that we've shown some data on in several medical conferences. And what we saw, and I think to me what's most interesting about this, is that it was well tolerated, that despite this being a neurosurgical procedure where patients have these cells directly implanted into the brain, we were able to do this consistently. So with each patient, we were able to deliver all the cells that we planned to, and the therapy was well tolerated over a period of 2 years. So really, I think good data for us to see that we were able to implant these cells, and people tolerated it very well over time.
Do you have any visibility how people feel already from the first trial?
Yes. So good question. So we don't directly have, I'll call them open patient interviews. So you mentioned a patient from London, and while I can't comment directly on their results because I wasn't involved in that work, I can tell you on our end, we haven't had individual patients directly talking to us. It remains an anonymous trial. However, what we've been able to do is look at various clinical measures. And again, these are exploratory. As I mentioned, this is predominantly a safety study, so a small number of patients. But what we've been able to do is track on average how people are doing. And in our exploratory data, we've been able to show some interesting trends that argue that patients are getting some potential benefit from this. However, this is something that really needs to be confirmed in larger studies.
Oh, we will be definitely looking forward to some feedback from the first patients, how they feel. So you've done the stage 1. What next? I know it's going to be stage 2, 3, and if you can just walk us through what it will entail and how long it will take.
Yes, so absolutely. So as I mentioned, we finished the phase 1, or we'll soon to be finishing the phase 1. Then we will have those patients again in a longer term follow-on trial where we will continue to monitor them. And so that will continue on for many years. We really would like to see how people do with this therapy over time. And then the next step, as I mentioned, is to assess these patients in a larger controlled trial. So a trial that has a group of people who do not get the therapy. And that's something we're actually planning now. That would be the phase 2 trial. That's something where we're actively working on throughout the company to get that designed correctly in a way that answers the questions we need to get answered, but making sure that we bring this to the clinic and to patients in a safe way and in an effective way. So we're planning that now. And then sort of, you mentioned for the future, that's a harder to give an answer to, because of course the timing and all of the steps really depend on what we see at each stage. And so we effectively have to wait until the next stage to understand what's next and what are we thinking about for the future.
Are you still recruiting for the next stage?
Yes and no. We haven't started recruiting, so effectively, the answer would be yes. So in other words, we've not predefined patients for the next phase. So once we establish an appropriate design and then establish hospitals that we will recruit the study in, then we will open up the study for enrollment. So it will be effectively open enrollment at that point, as opposed to saying we have a group of people who are sort of pre-tagged to move into the study. In our case, this will be once the recruitment is open, we will allow any patients who might meet the criteria to be able to be screened for the trial.
Exactly. In terms of criteria, that's very, very, very interesting one. It's who is able to receive this procedure? Is there any age limit, any type of symptoms which people should not have or have? Could you tell us a little bit more?
What I can tell you is we're still designing the phase 2 trial and what we call the inclusion criteria or the exclusion criteria. So what stage or type of symptoms that people need to have to be eligible for the trial is something we're still working on. And on the opposite side, what symptoms may keep someone from being in the trial, or what conditions may keep someone from being in the trial. So I wish I could be more specific, but we're still designing this and we're still working on it. And we're, importantly, still working with the regulators, the FDA and other regulatory authorities on what is the trial that we should and can be running at this point. So who are the patients we should be bringing in? And so because we're still working on that, I don't have specifics on exactly who. I don't want to give you one answer and then have that change, throughout our discussions.
But in the stage 1, there were what type of patients did you have criteria? There were younger people or anyone could.
In the stage 1, in the phase 1, we had yes, it was a broad range. So effectively from the 40s through the 70s, patients could come in. So that was the age group, and which to me I think is a broad range from a Parkinson's standpoint. Yes, it does not include, let's say, someone in their 20s or early 30s. But we did allow patients again in the 40s, which is, as you know, still relatively young for Parkinson's people with Parkinson's. So that group came in. We had a few other requirements, so they needed to be at a stage where they were having, we call motor fluctuations. So they had some time during the day where they were in an off state. And I'm sure you and many of your readers understand that concept of periods of the day when the symptoms aren't well controlled despite their best medical treatment. And so they did need to have some period of time during the day where they were effectively in an off state. So that is an important factor when we think about who might be best for this therapy.
Oh, that's very interesting, and I'm sure it will spark hope for many people since the quite big range, and in age. That's hopeful. In terms of the procedure, the surgery of injecting the cells, if I'm using the correct terms.
Yes.
It's how, I mean, I think the Swedes said was 13 hours procedure, so it's a really serious
Yes.
surgery. Is that the same in your case?
In our case, so again, I don't, I did see their report, but I don't know any more details past that about their trial. But in our case, the majority of the surgeries were shorter than that. And I don't have specific times. I could get back to you with those, but I can tell you the majority were shorter than that. That being said, it is a neurosurgical procedure, and patients do have to be aware of that. But I can tell you that, interestingly, in most cases, people go home after about 24 hours from the hospital. So often when we think neurosurgery and a procedure where we're injecting cells into the brain, this must be something you will be spending a long time in the hospital for. In this case, it's routinely roughly about a day. So I think to us that is telling that people actually do very well with this and are able to have their recovery at home.
Oh wow, that's immediately prompts me for two questions. I will start one at a time. I'm sorry. The post care. because 24 hours going after neurological, that's surgery, that's big plus. So what is the post care? It's do they need to take any medication afterwards, or is there any adjustments? Will they need a kind of top up with more cells after it? What do you anticipate?
Sure. So as far as the simple post-care after surgery, there's actually very little. It would be routine post-operative care, things like keeping the incision clean, etc. And then simply following that. So we typically would have someone see their physician within 7 to 10 days, just to make sure that the incision in the scalp is healing, and that there are no issues there. But past that, there's nothing to be done, as a result of the surgery itself. Of course, having patients rest, etc., just to recover from that. But otherwise, there's very little to be done there. In our case, patients do take an immunosuppressant regimen, and they take that for roughly 1 year. And so that is because the cells, we need to prevent the body from effectively rejecting the cells that were put in. And so patients post-care do take a medication for 1 year. And then there's that's it. And then the cells, if all goes well, and if this works as we hope it will work, they should simply persist at that point with no additional treatment needed. And then you mentioned the question of, will they need a top up, an extra? Our current plan is to have this be a one-time procedure. So the cells are implanted, injected, as you pointed out, into the brain, and we expect that will not need to be repeated in their lifetime.
Okay, well, we don't know how long the cells are going to survive there, Olive, because this has never been done before, right?
That is correct. Well, we do not know. What we hope, based on prior studies many years ago with a different type of injected cells, is that these will last for a period of time. But you're absolutely right. In our case, this has never been done before with this type of cell. So past 2 years, which is what we're looking at now, we do not know, but we obviously will be following this very closely over time.
Something which people are also quite anxious about are the side effects. I have read lots of papers over the years, and researchers are warning about how the cells are going to behave. Are we able to program them so they will not go off the tangent and, I don't know, create cancer, hallucinations, and so on? I mean, do you have any fast feedback if there were any risks or side effects?
Yes, absolutely. And this is something that we know people are concerned about, and something we watch very closely as well. Part of the benefit of a type of therapy that we're designing is that you get a much pure known cell type than some of the attempts that were done 20, 30 years ago. And so that's part of the benefit of this type of therapy. The potential benefit, I should say, is that we hope to minimize those concerns. Of course, we're watching very closely for these types of things. And I can tell you that through 18 months in our trial, which is the only data we have fully available at this point, we do not see any evidence for tumors, any evidence for cancer, or any evidence that the cells are growing uncontrollably, if that's a fair term. So we do not see evidence for that. The other thing which we've presented before is we don't see evidence of something called graft-induced dyskinesias, which is a long word to simply say extra movements or dyskinesias, which many of your readers may be familiar with. In prior trials, again, with a different type of cell product, this was a concern. This was an issue where patients would have sort of extra uncontrolled movements. We have not seen that in our patients, at least through the data we've been able to look at so far.
Okay. Do you have already data or some visibility if people who went through different procedures like DBS would be also able to go through the cell therapy?
Yes, so this is something that I know that people are very interested in as well. Thus far in our phase 1 trial, patients who had a DBS placement in the past were unable to be in the trial. So we wanted to be very pure about our first trial and be able to focus in on just the safety of our cells without adding the extra complexity of having also DBS implantation, because both procedures involve surgery through a very similar location. And so for the phase 1 trial, we wanted to make sure we were able to assess the safety just of our cells and our procedure. So patients that had a prior history of DBS were excluded from the trial. So unfortunately, thus far, we do not have that information, but we do know that that's something very interesting to many people.
Okay, so this will be investigated if that will be possible.
Yes, there are discussions around how we would best investigate that, but we know that many people have DBS, and those people may still be interested in cell therapy if DBS is not fully resolving their symptoms or fully giving them the benefits that they would like.
That would be powerful combo to have. Many people are really, really impatient. The patients are impatient, and I'm sure you are aware of what we call the cell therapy tourism. People go into length to go into kind of illegal procedures because currently there is no officially approved cell therapy for people with Parkinson's, right? And they go into clinic at Switzerland or India and get injected into arms or something. So you can see a lot of impatience and anxiousness, and being anxious about it. So could you tell us about the rollout, what people can expect? What are the timelines? Is it gonna to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, approximately? I know it's very hard to say, but give us some glimpse of hope.
Yes, I think I hope we can give some glimpse of, at least from our phase 1 trial, as I mentioned, it was designed for to show safety, and we feel that it was very well tolerated in that group. So for us, that was really a first step in saying, we think this can safely be tested more completely and more thoroughly in additional trials. And so yes, now we're working on designing the phase 2 trial. And as your readers may know, typically trials involve a phase 1 trial, or programs, I should say, involve a phase 1 trial, phase 2 trial, 1 or more phase 3 trials. It depends on the disease state, et cetera. And these trials involve, a number of patients and need to be run, often in many countries. So it is a process that takes time. And again, as I think I mentioned earlier, part of the answer to your question comes from what we see at each stage in the trials. So through the phase 1, we're very encouraged and certainly feel the need to move forward with phase 2. But then the results from the phase 2 will tell us what happens after that. And so it's very hard to give you even a ballpark number, because that number will change based on what we see over time. So I wish I could give you a number and say, 7 years or 10 years, but or 5 years, but I think it's very hard for us to know at this point.
But we're getting closer, and people can can have some.
I do think we can say that, yes, that based on what we've seen so far in the phase 1, we're very encouraged and do feel that that we need to move forward with this and continue to look at this in larger numbers of people in larger clinical trials.
Exactly how the rollout will look like. I mean, what people can expect, where if they would want to have it, do they need, should the waiting lists are going to be long and very quickly fill up? Do they need to go to their local hospitals? And are you planning to launch only in the US, or it's a global rollout?
Yes, so all great questions, and as you can imagine, all things that are probably daily discussions here. But at this point, that's enough years in the future that I don't have an answer. There are various ways this could look. Obviously, there are Parkinson's patients the world over, and as you point out, we do think there will be interest from many people who have Parkinson's disease, and at least hearing about this if and when it becomes available. So exactly where they will have to go to get this, I don't have an answer yet. It will be within a hospital for sure, as has been pointed out. It is a neurosurgical procedure, so this is something that will need to be delivered by hospitals that have neurosurgeons trained in what we call stereotactic neurosurgery. So this means, when we implant these, it's done using very specialized techniques and very specialized computerized imaging, because the area we implant these cells is very deep in the brain. And so to make sure that we are able to put them where they need to go, this involves very specialized neurosurgical equipment. And so it will need to be in hospitals that have that available. That's actually a fair number of hospitals around the world, more than one might think. So I don't see that this is going to be limited to 1 or 2 hospitals per country. But at the same time, exactly where you might have to go and what that might look like, I think is still enough years away that I don't have an answer.
But it's a good indicator. It gives us some ideas already.
Absolutely, yes. It's something we think about very, very frequently, because of course the overall goal here is trying to be able, again, if and when this is shown to be effective, to be able to provide it to as many people as are interested.
Yeah. Do you think you will be, because of the great interest and the long waiting list, you'll be able to serve as many people as possible to start with, or? Yes,
it's again another big topic, as you can imagine, and I think again it's enough years in the future that it's hard to answer that, because part of that will depend on how many people are interested. And at this point, we obviously talk to physicians who take care of these patients, and we actually actively talk with patient groups, both patient advocacy groups and as well as patients themselves, who serve as sort of patient ambassadors, if we want to think of it that way. So we really are talking with all of the different stakeholders in the Parkinson's community to understand who may be interested in this, who may not be interested in this, to try to get a better idea of what we might what group of patients we might want to be able to serve in the future. And again, it's a work in progress, so I can't give you exact numbers at this point.
Oh, that's very good to know. I mean, my last question, I think I have asked you all the questions I had on my list, or they came out through our conversation. I don't think you'll be able to answer it I was going to ask about the pricing. I think it's way too early to talk to, but we can probably anticipate if this involves neurological surgery, what it could be.
Sure. Yes, you're right. You answered the question, yes, for me, which is absolutely. This is still enough years away that the exact pricing and even the structure of that, how it's covered from various insurances, from Medicare, from similar insurances in other countries, something that we are already actively thinking about, because these are long processes to determine how therapies are covered from an insurance standpoint, in the various countries. Sort of getting to that answer, takes many years. So it's something that we're working on at this point, but don't have any, additional concrete data past that.
Fantastic. Marcus, thank you so much. It was lovely speaking to you. That's really helps and gives us better understanding from the patient's perspective, where you are, what are you working on, and we will be back in touch when you have the next milestone completed and you can bring us more good news.
Excellent. Yes, thanks for having me to talk with you today. And yes, we're very encouraged by what we've seen so far, and also very excited to know that people with Parkinson's disease are also interested in this, and we hope they know that we are working urgently to try to move this forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcus. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.